Did you know that a federal appeals court has just revived a Trump-era Justice Department subpoena aimed at QueerDoc, a gender-affirming care provider, reopening a fight over government power, patient privacy, and how far prosecutors can go when they say they are investigating possible fraud? The decision came from the Ninth Circuit, and it did more than simply let the subpoena live again. It sent the case back toward another round of lower court review, where a judge will have to sort out two huge questions at once: whether the government really needed this much information, and whether the request went far beyond what any legitimate investigation should require. At the center of the dispute is a simple but explosive tension. On one side, federal investigators say they are entitled to seek records as part of a broader inquiry tied to gender-affirming care. On the other side, QueerDoc and its supporters say the subpoena is the kind of demand that can chill care, expose sensitive medical histories, and frighten doctors and families away from seeking help. That fear matters because the records involved are not abstract. They can include intimate details about diagnosis, treatment plans, and the care of minors who were diagnosed with gender dysphoria and relied on clinicians for support. In a case like this, the paperwork itself can feel like a map of someone's private life. Here's why the lower court originally pushed back. A district judge found signs of bad faith, concluding that the subpoena was not simply a neutral request for evidence, but part of a broader effort that raised serious concerns about motive and overreach. That finding was crucial because courts are supposed to take seriously the idea that the government cannot use its investigative powers as a pretext to pressure a provider or rummage through protected medical records without a proper basis. The district court saw enough to question whether the subpoena was really about a focused inquiry or whether it was being used to cast a wide net over a controversial form of care. Sarah's reaction captured the sense of unease many advocates feel when these fights land in court. The problem, she said, is not only what the government asks for, but what the asking itself signals to patients. When a subpoena targets a provider known for helping transgender people, especially young people, it can send a message far beyond the courtroom. It can tell families that seeking care might put them on a government list, or that a diagnosis could later become the subject of scrutiny they never agreed to. In a system built on trust, that kind of signal can be devastating. Ashley's response was sharper because from the patient side, this does not feel theoretical at all. Witnesses and patient advocates have warned that when records are demanded in bulk, privacy becomes fragile fast. Ashley spoke for the people who worry about seeing deeply personal information swept into an investigation that they did not start and cannot control. For minors and their parents, the concern is even more intense. A diagnosis of gender dysphoria can already be emotionally complicated, and the decision to seek gender-affirming care is often made carefully, privately, and with hope that the information will stay protected. A subpoena can feel like a breach of that promise before anyone has even been accused of wrongdoing. Then there is Nia's point, the conscience running through the whole story. What happens when a legal fight over records starts to resemble a warning shot to an entire community? Critics say that is the real danger here. They argue that investigations aimed at gender-affirming care can become tools of intimidation, especially when they target the very providers who serve patients most likely to fear discrimination. If a clinic believes it may be forced to hand over sensitive files every time politics shifts, it may become less willing to take on difficult cases. If patients think their care could be exposed, they may delay treatment, hide symptoms, or avoid the system altogether. That is why this subpoena has become so much more than a records dispute. It has become a test of whether oversight can be separated from pressure. The Justice Department, for its part, says it is doing what investigators are allowed to do, seeking information it believes is relevant to potential wrongdoing. Supporters of the subpoena argue that providers should not be shielded from scrutiny simply because the subject of the investigation is controversial. They say the law does not vanish when the case involves gender-affirming care, and that the government must be able to check whether rules are being followed, billing is accurate, and claims made in medical settings can be verified. In that framing, the subpoena is not intimidation, it is process. But the privacy argument cuts just as deeply. QueerDoc and its allies say the breadth of the request matters as much as the reason given for it. Even if investigators have a legitimate interest, they still have to ask only for what they truly need. That means the lower court's next job is not just to decide whether the government can investigate. It must decide how much information the government can demand. whether the subpoena is narrowly tailored, and whether the burden on the provider and its patients is too heavy. Scope is the key word now. A subpoena that is too broad can become a fishing expedition, and a fishing expedition can become a threat. What makes the Ninth Circuit ruling so important is that it revived the subpoena without erasing the underlying concerns. The appellate court did not end the controversy. It reopened it. That means the next phase will likely focus on how to balance investigative authority against confidentiality, and on whether the district court's bad faith finding can survive closer review. If the lower court again sees signs that the government's request is excessive or improperly motivated, it may narrow the subpoena, restrict what can be collected, or impose protections around especially sensitive material. If it sides with the government, the records may move forward into the hands of investigators, and the implications could reach well beyond this one provider. That is why everyone is watching what happens next. The case could shape how courts treat subpoenas in politically charged healthcare investigations, especially when minors and gender dysphoria are involved. It could also influence how providers document care, how families think about privacy, and how willing people are to seek help when the subject is already under public attack. For now, the ruling has ensured that this fight is not over. It has only shifted the battleground, and that is the final warning. When a subpoena reaches into the most private corners of medical care, the question is never just what the government can ask for. It is what kind of system we are building when the fear of being watched starts to sit beside the decision to get treated. In cases like this, the paperwork can outlive the politics, and the chill can last long after the headlines fade.